The Dynasty Podcast is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects. You were warned. The Dynasty Podcast is brought to you by Tom Berkowitz Trucking. When it comes to rubbish removal and eco-friendly recycling, Tom Berkowitz Trucking makes it simple. Don't be a dick. Tom Berkowitz Trucking, servicing all of Riverdale since 1981.
It's time to play the music. It's time to light the lights. It's time to meet the assholes on the Dynasty tonight. That's right. It's time to put on makeup. It's time to dress up right. It's time to raise the curtain on the Dynasty tonight. Why do we always come here? I guess we'll never know. It's like some kind of torture to have to watch the show. And now let's get things started. Why don't you get things started? It's time to get things started on the most sensational, inspirational, celebrational, sexuational. This is what we call the Dynasty Podcast.
And now, coming to you live from Riverdale Studios, your host, the one, the only, Eric Costanza!
Greetings and salutations. We are back, bitches. Welcome to episode number 1 of the Tom Berkowitz Trucking Dynasty IX Dynasty Podcast. I am Commissioner Eric Costanza, and I am joined here in Riverdale Studios with my co-host for this episode, Bubba Palucha.
Hello everyone. For the first time in Dynasty Podcast history, we're conducting a pre-draft podcast.
That's right, Bub. Now, before we get into this show's shenanigans, and trust me, there are many, I'd like to talk a little bit about how the podcast has been upgraded for this season. Now, like the draft, like the power rankings, like the Riverdale Gazettes, it took a little bit of time to kind of feel out how the Dynasty Podcast should be conducted. It's kind of like foreplay, you know? You're feeling around a little bit, you're kind of experimenting with each other's bodies sexually, and then you finally find out where the goddamn G-spot is.
I know how that feels, Eric.
Do you?
I do. The G-spot, I mean.
Right. Now, Bub, I know you were part of this off-season's Dynasty board member meetings.
I was.
We had a bomb scare.
Mm-hmm.
Whiffin actually touched me inappropriately a few times. I kind of liked it.
I watched.
Right. But one of the many things we did talk about in the meetings were how to make the podcast even better.
Boom.
Now, we got a lot of great feedback from various coaches. But in general, everyone likes the podcast already. But here are some changes and upgrades that we will be doing this season based off of all of your goddamn feedback. Number 1, we created some more jingles, some more segments, so we have a little bit more different things that we'll be bringing to the table this year. Number 2, we're going to be doing some more co-hosting, as proven here with my colleague Bub sitting beside me right now.
Hello.
Bub was one of the proponents and one of the many who mentioned this as an idea. So, Bub, maybe you can talk a little bit more about why you think having more co-hosts on the show is beneficial.
Yeah, well, kind of going along with everything else that we're upgrading for this year, it just makes it a little more interactive, maybe a little more funny. You can have some witty banter, go back and forth, and we're not just listening to your, monotonous voice the whole time. You can actually listen to someone else as well. Well, I mean...
No, you're right. You're right. You're right.
It's a little better to hear, myself, maybe Coach John Costanza and his beautiful voice. Just a little something different.
Gotcha. I agree. And then the third thing that we are going to be upgrading here is less information obtained on CBS. So In other words, this is really more in regards to the last week's results, the power rankings, the next week matchup segments, where, I went into great detail about everything, and one of the feedback that were provided by some coaches was, a lot of that information is good, but it's really redundant. I can get all that information by simply being a member of the league and, going on CBS and knowing what happened via the Gamecast.
Unless you're the guards, though.
Well, right, yeah, unless you're the guards and you have no goddamn idea what the fuck is going on. Anywho, so what we're going to do this year is, again, just have less of that information provided. So, again, that kind of goes hand in hand with the co-host thing and the more unscripted banter, but I guess what I'd like to say is, when we're talking about the last week's results and the power ranking segments and the next week's matchups, we're going to more talk about kind of more of a high level. So if we're talking about the last week's results segment, then we're going to be basically, saying, okay, the quick flash, here's what happened last week. This team beat this team, Arian Foster scored 50 points. This team beat this team, so really quick, high level. Does that make sense, Bub?
You know what? I'm not sure it does, but I think they got it. I think they got the gist of it.
You sure? Are you sure? I can go over it again.
No, I don't want to.
Okay.
Let's move on.
Let's move on.
All
okay.
Right.
Same goes for power rankings. We'll quickly just talk about.
Yeah, they got it.
Okay.
They got it.
Shit. All right, and then lastly, this is the one I'm more kind of horny about. I'm more excited about this one. I think you guys are gonna really like this one. More interactiveness. Coach Brian and Whiffen were the bigger proponents of bringing this one out to the table. A lot of you guys really enjoyed some of the crazy ass segments that I had last year, where I called in a charter and did just some really unusual things.
Wacky things.
We're going to be doing a lot more of that this season. We're going to have our own interactive segment dedicated for this type of crap. And it's really just going to be, really one of my goals this season is to make the Dynasty Podcast an actual, or at least somewhat of an actual legit media source. Believe it or not, we have some really interesting guests lined up for this season. I think a lot of you are going to be shocked that I was able to obtain some of these guests. But anyway, that's one of those are some of the things that we're going to be doing this season to upgrade the Dynasty Podcast. Again, based off of all your feedback, and by all means, if you have any more feedback, feel free to provide it to me or to whomever. All right. Well, with that being said, let's go ahead and get into this episode, shall we, Bub?
I like that idea.
On this episode, Bub is going to go ahead and provide a Power Rankings update. He is the head of the Power Rankings Association, so he's going to provide us all with some of the happenings, what's going on with that. Then Bub and I are going to go ahead and we're going to mock round 2 of the upcoming draft that's coming up here this Sunday. Again, round 1 is the keeper, so we're going to mock round 2. And then we are going to have ourselves the first of many interactive segments, as I mentioned before. But before I go ahead and announce who the guest is going to be on the show later on the show here, why don't you go ahead? You were telling me earlier what you mentioned to your brother Zach regarding the guest. Why don't you tell everyone what you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, well, let me tell you, folks. When Eric told me who we got for a guest on the first podcast, I was not only surprised, excited, insert adjective here.
Were your nipples hard?
Left.
Yeah, I was going to say the left.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I talked to my brother. I said, you know what? I could probably give you 1 million or 2 million guesses as to who Eric got as a guest, and you wouldn't get it. You wouldn't get it. And I firmly believe that, Eric.
I concur with you, Bub. I concur. I'm going to announce it now. Later.
Oh, man.
Yes, get ready. Later on the show, we are going to have the original creator and inventor of Nerf. That's right. His name is Mr. Ren Geyer. Look his ass up online if you want. If you don't believe me, Google Ren Geyer. R-E-Y-N Geyer. G-U-Y-E-R. He is the original creator and inventor of Nerf.
I'm excited, Eric. I can't wait for that. I don't even want to. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Anyway, what better way is there to prepare for the draft